Hi there, and welcome to the Anita Chat podcast. I'm your host, Anita Rombo, and this is the podcast for growth-oriented women to have authentic, real talk. Nothing is off the table here, but as an intuitive self-relationship coach, you'll find the content gravitates towards mindset, intentional action, spirituality, and all things wellness. So if you're ready to learn, laugh, show up, and glow up to be the best version of yourself, grab your favorite bevy, settle in, and we've got lots to chat about. Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of I Need to Chat. Today, I'd like to introduce Katherine Denkers, the founder and solo practitioner at Denkers Family Law and Mediation. Katherine provides virtual family law services to anyone in Ontario, Canada, and I know that most of us, when we get married, envision a lifelong commitment, but in the USA, 50% of marriages end in divorce. So Katherine is going to chat about alternatives to the family court system for a more peaceful resolution and things we can do to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Katherine, welcome to the chat.
Thanks, Anita. I'm so excited to be here.
First off, I am so excited to have you on the show for so many reasons. Mostly, I love your mission and I'm so proud of your success as a fellow growth-oriented goal-getter friend. And it's been about 15 years since we caught up, so this feels extra special. For the readers tuning in, I'm friends with Katherine's older sister, and we took this once-in-a-lifetime vacation to France to visit Katherine where she was doing an exchange. So this is really special to be catching up with you in this way. And thank you so much for joining the show. First and foremost, Katherine, I really also resonate with your philosophy just simply because when I think of amicable partings, I think of Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin and their conscious uncoupling. And I know that sometimes, when people go through marriages that fall apart or relationships that fall apart, things can get really ugly. And I feel that your method really helps promote the peace and invites in collaboration. Can you tell us, first and foremost, what motivated you to go into family law and then specialize in these alternatives to family court?
Sure. So I actually fell into family law by accident. I thought I was going to be a civil litigator, one of those top business contract go-getters that like suits. I was picturing suits is what I was going to do. And but it turned out I started taking family law cases because that is what was coming through the door. Family law was really understaffed in our area. So I started taking those cases more and more. And as I took them, I just really the courtroom setting is not conducive to family issues. It works really well for things like suits where they're ripping apart contracts and stuff like that. The adversarial process has its place, but it just doesn't suit families well because it really tears people apart. It pits people against each other. And I was noticing my clients would go in, they're scared when they start because nobody really knows what to expect in a separation and all you hear is horror stories. They get to the family court process and they think, okay, this is going to solve it, make it go away. It ends up taking 2 years to get through the court process. And so they just end up leaving angry and frustrated. So I was really lucky. One of the local judges in my area could see this frustration building in me as well. And she introduced me to a couple groups, the Association of Family Conciliation Courts and the Ontario Association of Family Mediation. And through those two groups, I really got the chance to explore alternative dispute resolution processes, which coincide with things like the conscious uncoupling that Gwyneth Paltrow did. And it's just such a more wholesome, healthier way for couples to go through a separation, which really, at this point in our society, we should really be looking at as a natural phenomenon. People separate, it's just part of life. It's something that we shouldn't stigmatize, and it's something that we should be able to work through with grace. So mediation really helped me to come to that place, and it really allows me to give that opportunity to my clients as well, and I love it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There is a place for some more peaceful parting of ways. And, not everyone is meant to be together, and there's definitely no shame in a partnership ending and all of that. And I often find that the children are the ones that suffer the most in these kinds of situations. I know everyone is impacted, but I mean, these little people carry around a lot of trauma as a result of some of these, played out kind of dramatic courtroom procedures.
And children tend to, like, depending on the developmental stage of your child, younger children don't really realize there's a world outside of them, and they see themselves as the center of the world. And when something is going wrong in the world, they're very prone to saying, oh, this is my fault, because I'm the master of my universe. So it's really, really hard on children when they're seeing their parents go through a struggle. And the more that we can shield them from that.
So knowing that this other kind of alternative exists, can you tell us what are the main differences between going through the courts versus exploring an alternative?
Right. So I mentioned before that the court system is an adversarial system. It is literally built to say, each of you present your best argument wins. It's the simplified version. That works great for things like criminal matters and civil matters. But when you come to families, it just doesn't work, because there's not usually a best argument. People have different philosophies about parenting. People have different philosophies about what's fair in their relationship. And it just doesn't, there's not a blanket generalized rule that you can apply to every family and say, okay, this is what's going to be fair, or this is what's going to be best for every family in every circumstance. So in mediation and in collaborative family law, which is another branch of alternative dispute resolution that I do, those two options allow families to come up with creative solutions to the challenges that they're facing. So they're not slotted into this framework that might not be one size fits all. And on top of this, the people that run family court are lawyers and judges. And lawyers and judges went to law school, and all that they were taught in law school is the law. They don't teach us child psychology and development. They don't teach us accounting. They don't teach us how to get around tax regulations the way that accountants and actuaries do. We don't know how to properly evaluate your real estate property. We're not realtors. So the court is looking at your family through one lens. And what's great about mediation and collaborative family law and these other alternative dispute resolutions is that you can bring in any expert that you need for the situation that you're facing. We can bring in a social worker if we need a social worker, or an accountant, or whoever we need to get the information we need so that you're making the most informed decisions possible.
I love the fact that there's this kind of circle of support that you can count on, or you can reach out to support you in this process of experts. That's really lovely. And it makes it feel a little bit more multifaceted. Would you agree? You're not just seeing through that one lens. You're tapping into who you are and the bigger, broader kind of layers that are your identity or your current lifestyle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that part for me is so important. And I remember the stress I was feeling when I was being asked to do some of these things, like trying to fight what's best for a young child. But I don't actually know what's best for my clients' children. I don't actually ever get to meet my clients' children. The best people in place to make decisions for what's best for those children are their parents.
Right.
And so these alternative dispute resolution programs really bring that focus back to the family.
So with that being said, can you walk us through what some of those alternatives to the family court system may be? Like, is there just one, or is there multiple options? And how does one make a decision about which option to move forward with?
There are definitely multiple options. So I am a certified mediator with the Ontario Association of Family Mediation. Mediation is a process where I meet with both people. I call them separating spouses. With both separating spouses, I get to talk to each of them alone, and then the three of us talk together, and I give them all the general legal information that they need, how child support works, how spousal support works, how we do equalization calculations. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that separating couple is in the driver's seat, and they get to make all the final decisions. I don't impose any decisions on anybody. I'm just there as an information resource and a little bit as like a coach or a guide through the divorce process, like what steps they need to take to get from beginning to end. And within that, if we get to a spot where I don't have all the information that they need, that's when we bring in the experts. So it's kind of an ad hoc expert. The other alternative dispute resolution process that I am involved with is called collaborative family law. Both separating spouses get their own collaborative family lawyer. And right off the hop, we also bring in a family professional and a financial professional. So you have 4 professionals right out of the gate who still sit at like a round table discussion to walk you through the process beginning to end. People think that that sounds really expensive. And I mean, it is more expensive than just hiring me as a mediator alone, but you are still saving money in the long run because you're cutting down on duplication of effort. So for example, everybody usually needs some kind of equalization calculation done. When you have a collaborative team, the financial professionals taking care of all the finances, you're not paying both lawyers to go through those finances. You have the expert taking care of that piece of it. Same with the parenting plan for your children. The family professional is going to take care of that piece with you. And the lawyers are there to structure your agreement and put all of those pieces together into a legal contract that you leave with it. Other alternative dispute resolution options are things like arbitration. That's where you can basically hire your own private judge to make a decision for you when the two of you aren't ready to come to a resolution between each other. I'm not involved with that one just yet because you need lots of experience and lots of accreditations to do that. I'm not there yet. But mediation, collaborative family law are the other 2 most common ones that you'll.
You mentioned a neutral family professional. What is a family professional? I've never heard of that term.
In collaborative family law, we call them family professionals. These are people that have multifaceted backgrounds, whether it's in child psychology or family sociology. And their real focus is on the family dynamics, childhood development, and their focus is on guiding discussions and analyzing behaviors and adjusting for behaviors in the separating spouses dynamics. So family professional is kind of just an umbrella term for anyone who has that skill set.
Interesting. I never heard of that. And then from my understanding, and it's super limited in addition to this conversation, so thank you. This has been really good. Once you kind of start with one, like say you wanted to move forward with mediation, but that doesn't really work out for you, you can move on to a different model. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if we think of all these processes as kind of on a spectrum, and you have mediation on one end where you just have the one mediator, and then you have on the other end the court process where it's very involved and you have like the whole bureaucracy of the court there. Collaborative family law is somewhere in the middle. Anywhere that you start on the spectrum, you can move back and forth to find the level of involvement from professionals that works best for you. So if you start in mediation, you could end up in a collaborative family law situation. If you start in court, you could end up in mediation. So you are free to move across the spectrum to find the process that is going to work best for you.
I love that idea, just simply because, I mean, nobody envisions even going through this, and when you're in it, it's very stressful, and I'm sure it's really hard. And so if you don't even know about the system and you're just kind of thrown in, and not any of it is probably going to feel very good at the time, but it's kind of nice to be able to figure out what feels best. Yeah, that sounds really great.
And I've had some situations where people end up with perhaps a lawyer or a mediator, and it's just not jiving for them. You're not stuck with that one professional. You are free to change your lawyer, to change your mediator, to change whatever professional you want to change. So just as you're free to move along the spectrum, you're free to choose the people that resonate with you.
So important, because you really need to have, I think, a relationship where you trust somebody with when you're in such a vulnerable state to help you through, right? So, on that note, you mentioned that you practice in Ontario and in Canada. And are these options available in other Canadian provinces or other parts of the world? We do have listeners from all over the place.
Absolutely. So I practice in Ontario because that's where my license is. But these processes are available all over Canada, all over the world. They're actually far more prevalent outside of Canada. In Australia, especially, the UK is really starting to pick up more and more on mediation and collaborative family law. BC, I believe, has taken great strides towards alternative dispute resolution processes. They're a little bit more ahead of the game than Ontario is at the present moment. And the organizations that I am a part of all have international partners and umbrellas, um, which has been really great because we get the opportunity to see how these other programs are growing and expanding across the world and the country.
Right. So, given your line of work, I'm assuming the answer here is you absolutely believe in what you're doing. But in your opinion, can a dissolution of a partnership truly be collaborative? It sounds great on paper. How is it in real life?
It's surprising. My clients routinely and frequently surprise me with what they come up with, when they come up with it, how they come up with it. Because again, I'm just an information provider. I can try and help spark creativity, but all of the creative solutions and the final decisions come from my clients. People tend to think that separation means this person's going to get cut out of my life and I never have to deal with them again. But that's very rarely true, especially when you have children. When you have children and you're going through a separation, your relationship isn't ending, it's just changing. It's morphing into a different relationship. And so within that, having a truly collaborative experience through your separation is even more important because you're going to be a co-parent with this person down the line. Neither of you have an interest in disassociating from each other or totally cutting the other person out of your life because you'll need that person in some capacity as your co-parent moving forward. So I often talk to my clients and say, how do you picture your children are, say, like 5 and 7 right now? What do you picture their graduation to be like? What do you picture their wedding to be like? Where are you? Where's the other person? Do they have a relationship with both of you? And what does that relationship look like? And usually that brings people to the place where they're saying, yeah, you know what, it's important that our kids have relationships with us.
I couldn't agree more, Catherine. I think those are really good questions for couples to reflect on because they're definitely not going to be done with each other once they've formally separated or divorced. So, on that note, I often work with people who are experiencing life transitions as a coach, and this is obviously a very big one. And I see a lot of women in particular that come through my practice that are experiencing a loss of identity. And there's so many different feels that happen with respect to a marriage disintegrating. What are some of the biggest recommendations or words of advice as a lawyer that's supporting people through this life transition?
Right. So tell a lot about this one. One of the things that I've started doing with my clients right out of the gate when they first come to me is a value sorting exercise. They get a questionnaire that includes a list of values, and they have to pick six, their top six values. I have things on there like serenity, peace, education, compassion, all of these things. You pick your top six. And from those top six, you make a value statement and you reflect on how you want these values to carry through your separation, how you want these values to be reflected to your children, how you want to embody these values yourself in your relationship with your separating spouse. It's an exercise that I find clients really like. It's something I try to build the value statements into your separation agreement when it's finally drafted. But it's one of these exercises that you do it once, but it's great to do it twice. It's great to do it 3 times. So it's good questions to ask yourself, whatever stage of the separation that you're in, what are my values? What are the key principles that I want to live by? And how am I going to embody those moving forward through this process? That's going to be your guidepost when you're making decisions. The other things that I would say, information is power. A lot of stress in the separation process comes from the unknown. How does this work? What comes next? What's going to happen to me? And the sooner you get that information, the better that you will feel. With that, though, be aware of free advice. A lot of people have gone through separations and divorces. A lot of people have horror stories. And everybody is happy to share those experiences with you and others around them. But every situation is unique. It's really important to remember that what happened to one person is not necessarily going to happen to you, especially as ADR processes get more and more common. And what happened to your friends, family members, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, cousin is specific to them. Same goes for Google. It is really easy to find these horror stories. But before you stress out, talk to your professionals. Get your professionals lined up. Talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyer, talk to your mediator, and rely on the advice that those people are giving you, because it's far more specific and relevant to what you are going through in the moment, not, what came down the grapevine. And then the last thing I would say as a part of advice is be willing to think outside of the box. We're really conditioned to think that there's a one size fits all, or that there's just a way to do it, or whatever the courts does is fair. That's not always true in my experience. So the clients that get the best results, I find, are the ones that are willing to get creative, the ones who are willing to say, okay, if I do this, maybe that'll happen. Or what if we just take this part out of the equation? Or how can we work around this problem together?
These are all really good pieces of advice. I also do a similar values mapping exercise that's extremely popular with my clients. So that's interesting that you're applying it in the line of your work and I'm applying it through a different lens, but anchoring to their values is so critical, right? As a self-relationship coach, it's about connecting to what you are authentically valuing in your life, no matter the transition. So it's really interesting to see that you're applying that too as a lawyer. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch gears for a minute. I know we were talking about marriages not working out, but let's talk about, if we could backtrack, there's this concept of prenups. And I know that I don't know much about it, but I when I think of prenups, I think of really rich Hollywood people. I think there's a lot of stigma associated with people are either all for it or super against it. Can you educate us on prenups a little bit? Is there anything that we can do to protect ourselves if we're going on to a potential second marriage, or before we embark on our first one? What do you think of them?
Yeah. Honestly, if I had a magic wand, I would have everybody get a prenup or cohabitation agreement. Prenup is kind of a catch-all term. So we have marriage contracts, we have cohabitation agreements. Marriage contracts are for married people. You can get a marriage contract before you get married, or you can get a marriage contract after you're married. It doesn't have to be a prenup, pre-nup. It can be a post-nup.
Oh, I never heard of that. Okay.
Yeah.
And do people do this?
People do this. I actually have a couple clients right now who are going through the process of doing that.
Okay.
And here, yes, so we hear about them most often when we're talking about celebrities. I believe Britney Spears just got one. But at the end of the day, what a prenup actually does, you are making a contract with your spouse, whether it's your common law spouse or your married spouse. There are certain laws that are in place that when you enter into these relationships, there are certain obligations that are going to be imposed on you by the state. What a prenup does is create a contract that breaks out of that mold. You are allowed to contract out of these preset legal determinations just by making a contract with your spouse. And yes, the more money you have, perhaps the more important that they are. But literally anyone, especially as we get married and enter into these relationships at older ages, when you get married at, say, 21, neither of you might own a house, or you're just both saddled with, student debt and things. And so you don't really have anything to include in a prenup. But if you're getting into a relationship at, say, 32, one of you owns a house, you get married, you both move into that house. Now that house is a matrimonial home. And regardless of who put a down payment on it, regardless of how much equity was in it when you were married, that house is going to be split 50-50 in case of a separation, which is one of the most common situations I find people saying, well, that's not fair. That's why you should get a prenup, because you can say, I'm willing to split so much of this house with my partner, but I want my $90,000 deposit back that I invested before I even met this person, right?
Right.
So there are definitely things that everybody has that they can protect. The other big one are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, whether they're sole proprietors or whether they have a corporation, it is crucial, I think, to get a prenup in place. Not only to protect yourself, but more importantly, to protect your business. And especially if you have business partners, shareholders, or employees, you want that business to be stable and not to be rocked by any potential kind of separation that you might have to deal with. And things can get really messy. So when you are a sole proprietor, all of your business stuff is still owned under your personal name, which means it's all up for grabs in terms of an equalization, unless you've specifically set those things aside in the and if you own a corporation, when you have a corporation, that's a separate legal entity. So the corporation itself isn't necessarily up for grabs in an equalization, but you own shares in the corporation, and those shares can be equalized. But what frequently happens if you have a shareholders agreement is that there are specific rules and regulations about how those shares can be sold, divided, or not, or how they might be valued. And family law doesn't always take into account what those shareholder agreements are going to say. So if you don't have a prenup, it gets really messy and you get into a lot of arguments about how these two opposing legal lenses are going to be resolved.
Very interesting. I got to do some research because I'm an entrepreneur and I don't have any kind of agreement. I mean, I'm not worried about anything, but I mean, never say never, right? All right.
Yeah, and I don't like to be doom and gloom about it. I don't think that you should go into a prenup thinking that you're going to get separated. That's not really the point. It's more like an insurance policy. You don't get life insurance being like, oh, I'm going to die tomorrow, right? You get life insurance just in case. A prenup is an insurance, just in case.
I like the way that you frame that. Yeah. And I mean, in this day and age, we're insured for everything, right? For our car, for our home, for even if you rent an apartment. I remember when I lived in Toronto, I couldn't rent without apartment insurance, and I had never even heard of that. So there's insurances for everything, my friends.
Yep.
So as we wrap this up, I was wondering, Katherine, if you could share some of the biggest lessons you learned about relationships. You are working with so many different couples and you're seeing so many different dynamics. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you have learned about relationships and through all of this?
I think it goes back to kind of a comment I made before where I'm always surprised by my clients. People are surprising and will surprise you. You would think after hundreds of couples that there would be certain patterns to the way a settlement comes about or how it turns out. And there's a couple of things like that, but usually every couple surprises me at some point with a random act of kindness or a creative solution, sometimes a dark secret or an unexpected vulnerability. Every couple is truly unique, and getting to know my couple clients and building agreements that reflect them is what keeps me motivated in my.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Katherine, and thanks so much for joining the chat today. It was such a pleasure having you on. I've learned so much, and I think my listeners have too. And on that note, how can my listeners learn more about you?
Sure. I have a website. You can check me out at denkerslaw.com. The process options that I offer are outlined there. You can also book a free 30-minute discovery call at that website to talk about the process options and which one you think is right for you. And you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at denkerslaw.com, or sorry, at denkerslaw.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include all of that information in the episode description as well. And friends, if there's anyone that you know that would enjoy or could use this episode, please share this episode with them. I'm sure that there is a wealth of knowledge that would be helpful to your loved one. Until next time, folks, thank you for tuning in. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Anita Chat podcast. If you haven't taken a minute to leave a review, I would absolutely love to hear from you. All you need to do is to search for the show, click your star rating, and type in a few words. Also, if there's a specific topic you'd like to see covered in this podcast, if you'd like me to be your coach, or if you want to just chat, feel free to send me an email or shoot me a message through my IG, which you'll find in the show notes. The show notes will also contain any links to the freebies that were referenced in this episode. Until next time, friends, it's been great chatting with you.